A familiar face in Idaho's legal community will be sticking around a little longer in the Gem State. Former U.S. Attorney for Idaho Josh Hurwit has joined Boise's branch of Holland and Hart because of what he calls, quote, a commitment to giving back to the Treasure Valley. Well, you may recognize the name and maybe the face because he's been involved in some pretty big cases, both as a U.S. attorney and a special prosecutor. Here's Joe Paris.
For years, Josh Hurwit led pursuits of justice across Idaho, elevating to U.S. Attorney from 2022 to 2025. In a traditional move, he left the office as a new administration took over the federal government earlier this year, but still finds himself committed to the Gem State.
Everything that we're seeing in our communities, from economic growth to preserving resources for future generations, and for me, it's a great fit, I think, for the next phase of my career to serve Idaho clients and seek justice in new ways.
Thinking back to your time as U.S. Attorney, some time has passed now.
Yeah.
Does it feel different than when you first left the job? Have you had time to kind of reflect on that experience?
I think we talked, pretty quickly after I resigned, and it was, overwhelming feeling of gratitude, and that hasn't changed. I know that the folks in the U.S. Attorney's Office here still manning the ship, doing great work, keeping our communities safe, and I'm forever grateful I got to participate in that mission and lead the office.
Hurwit planned to take some time off to recharge, but shortly after leaving the U.S. Attorney's Office, he received a call to pursue justice on the most talked about case across Idaho and possibly the country, an offer to be a special prosecutor on the Moscow murders trial.
I got a call from Bill Thompson, the lead prosecutor on the Kohberger case, and said, hey, we're going to trial. We know your experience, we know your skill set. Would you join us in taking this case to trial and seeking justice? And I'd obviously been aware of the case and somewhat involved in supporting the FBI and its work in the case, and just being an Idahoan now, recognizing the significance of the case. For me, it was an easy yes to jump on that and dedicate myself to that.
What was your role as a part of that team?
Yeah, so I was one of 3 trial attorneys. So we were preparing to take it to trial, preparing our opening statement, preparing jury selection. I think we were going to have about 100 witnesses, and a third of those were going to be mine. So I was preparing like I did when I was a federal prosecutor, getting cases.
But the trial never happened. In a surprise move to many, Brian Kohberger made a plea deal. What was your reaction like when, I guess, you found out from the defense that, okay, we're gonna make a deal here?
Yeah, I was surprised that there was that interest from the defense, given both my mindset of I'm joining this team to be in trial in court for 3 to 4 months, and also just that he had never shown any indication of even considering admitting to what he did, and then something changed, and so it was surprising.
Avoiding trial and the possibility of the death penalty was met with mixed reactions from victims' families and community commentary.
And we understand, the debate about that, and that there are different reasonable opinions on that. For us, I think what it came down to ultimately was the finality for the victims' families, most of whom wanted this resolution the way it turned out. They don't have to go through a painful trial, a lengthy, painful trial. They don't have to go through decades of appeals and get re-traumatized every time there's a new court filing or new court hearing. As you probably know, in the death penalty here in Idaho, we have folks on death row that have been there for 4 decades, 40 years, and every time there's a hearing, those families get notified. They have the opportunity to go to court. They, in some sense, have to relive the trauma. And so for us, thinking long-term, the finality of the resolution that was reached, it was not an easy decision. We would much prefer that everyone agreed with it, but recognizing that reasonable minds were going to disagree, that was still the best outcome to give people finality, peace of mind that he will not be ever out walking the streets, and that, as you said, people can, and the community can move forward and heal to the extent possible.
And another interesting perspective that Josh kind of filled me in on, I hadn't really thought about it, Brian, is the case itself, and it was held here again at the Ada County Courthouse. It has an impact on everybody from the prosecutors the victims' families, of course, but you don't really think about, the administrators, the people that happen just to be around it in the offices that we would never know the names of and their involvement in.
Right.
And it weighs heavy on people, this type of the Moscow murders case. So it's just an added reminder of, I guess, the impact that this entire thing had, impacting real lives here in the Treasure Valley, something that I think was lost in, of course, in the international narrative that was, just about this terrible, terrible crime.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Joe.